guys? Hey, it's me, Z. Tell me if I'm already just coping way too much, but am I the only one that thinks over the past year or so, Faye's done a pretty good job at making a lot of unit types pretty strong? Or rather, over the course of 2025, I think Faye has gone out of their way to make a lot of struggling archetypes catch up to modern standards. Not this modern standard, but by generic standards, the introduction of so many new types of skills, rings, and statuses have breathed new life into melee units as a whole, especially after the addition of Mythic Lyn, who can make all range 1 units into range 2 units. Melee units have never felt so back. Of course, barring stuff like melee armors, because they've been good for as long as I can remember. Even staff units have gotten such a markup in quality over the past several months thanks to all of the inheritables they've been getting. Arguably being the poster child for this, they've become one of the better generic typings in the game as a result. And with that, so many units have never felt so usable now. However, there are still a few struggling unit types that need some touching up. Or I guess more specifically, range 2 units. Range 2 units, not to be confused with ranged 1 units that can become range 2 units. You know, your mages, bows, daggers, and stuff. I don't think they're in the best spot right now. And don't even get me started on ranged armors, I already did that. Of course, this isn't really applying to staff units because they've got all the support tools they could ever want, nor is it applying to the outliers that are actually good, like Micaiah, Veronica, Chrom, and so on. It really feels like there's not much of an out for range 2 units if you aren't a modern unit with a PRF or supportive in any way, which, to be fair, could apply to generics in general if comparing them to modern counterparts, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think if you wanted to use a generic melee unit these days, then it wouldn't actually be that hard to do. They have a lot of tools at their disposal, which is why I think range 2 units could use a bit of an uplift right about now. And maybe this is reaching way too far, but is there really any reason to use a range 2 unit over a ranged 1 unit? Again, not including actual good range 2 units, but just generally speaking. Thanks to the introduction of Mythic Lyn and their range 2 style bonus, I would argue they've been usurped of their roles. But make no mistake, I think melee units did need a buff of some kind to their range due to all of the range increases they've been doing this year, and I actually do like what Lyn provides in the game. This definitely isn't a this is bad type of thing. If anything, it's more that I want units that catch up more than I want them to keep increasing range in general, which I think did go a bit too far. Still, we do kind of need to figure out what comes next here. Melee units are freely able to match range units in terms of coverage or even exceed them at times with a movement bonus and have significantly better tools at their disposal. Of course, that requires the use of the new Lyn, but how much of an opportunity cost is that really? It's 1 unit slot, but with the benefit of having way more options at their disposal, with one of the most notable options being in the Erica ring. I think the Erica ring is a massive distinction between the two ranges, as you could freely give melee units brave hits. Range 2 units at least have the Lyn ring, but it doesn't necessarily let them range match. You can at least swing from 5 spaces away with it, but it's also every 2 turns, so it's not consistent either. This is also not including Sword, Lance, and Axe Flyers, who now have access to an innate pass Celica ring B slot, so they can naturally hit 7 range and get brave hits if they want. Honestly, Sword, Lance, and Axe units definitely have the most privilege of the melees. That said, the combination of Mythic Lyn's range 2 style bonus and Erica ring arguably makes range 1 units strictly stronger nukes than most range 2 options. Range 1 units are the new range 2 units, and range 2 units are the new keep on the bench units. Again, not the actual good ones, but you know. I think this is also seen through the amount of inheritables they've been getting over the course of this year. Melee units have been getting so many tools like Air Superiority, Opponent Finish and Assault, Brutal Tempest and Echo, Nulcia Void, Duelist Blow, Faith, the Beast Feud C-Slots, Trample, and plenty more. And for what it's worth, it's not as if range units haven't been getting anything, but I think they're too specific, like Arc Fort Breath, the Lookout skills, Speed Res Low Finish, Shackle, which is more supportive in nature, and so on. There are other skills that the two ranges share between each other, like Havoc, Speed Taker, pair up fighter skills, specials with DR in them, etc, but it's something that really elevates range units specifically. Also, I'm not sure to what extent this matters, but I figured I'd mention it anyway. They've been a bit picky about giving out close counter to range units, which doesn't matter for the most part outside of one specific case, that specifically being for Eikthenir magic save stuff, which does hurt a couple units since they can't counter against stuff like Lyn Ring and Celica style. That said, it's not the worst thing ever, but it can prevent some of them from functioning in that role like Athos, so I figured it'd be worth mentioning anyway. It's funny because the melees can take more of an offensive stance like the range 2 units, but the range 2 units can't act defensively like a lot of the melees could. But either way, they haven't been giving out a whole lot to range units, but I wouldn't say they're unusable per se. It just goes back to the matter of why would it even be worth considering? And because of that, maybe they should consider buffing range 2 units soon. There's plenty of ways they could go about doing that. It's not as if they're unsalvageable units, but I do think if they're going to buff them, then they should be in a way that also makes them stand out more from from their melee counterparts, and that could always be as simple as giving them newer inheritables that don't overlap with what melee units can do. That, or they could just go down the band-aid route. The easiest and arguably laziest solution they could do is increase the range for range 2 units, which would technically work, to be fair. However, I don't think we should keep increasing range. Most of the reason why we're even at this point is because they kept increasing range in the first place, and if they keep increasing it, then we'll just end up in the same position over and over and over again. Also, it's lazy. Don't do that, please. Also, side tangent, but am I the only one that feels like we could be reaching a breaking point with map sizes due to range increases? Units and Aetherids can reach across the entire map naturally, which is really silly. At least there's the safety fence you could use until you swing onto the foe, but still. Sometimes it feels like a map is too small because of it. Even in summoner duels at times, since units can similarly reach so far from across the map, but I'm also unsure if increasing the map size would be the right call per se. It would alleviate those issues, but if they were to do something like that, then there's really no way to reverse it. Even increasing it by a few tiles would impact a lot of the game, and there's no telling just how much of the game will get affected from it. And I won't say it's a bad idea overall, but I think it might need more consideration as there's really no going back from that direction. I guess it's more food for thought, but maybe that's just a me thing. The next equally lazy and straightforward solution they could do is make range 2 units hit harder. For the first time ever, a suggestion nobody has ever come with. Am I a genius or what? It's about as standard of a solution as it gets, but it's not like they don't do stuff like that anyway. We tend to bounce back between tank meta and nuke meta, so sooner or later they're going to drop more units with disgustingly high firepower to compensate. Y'all remember Ninja Tsunaki, right? She was the de facto nuke for months and nothing really lived her. We'll probably end up with another one of those eventually. Even so, the amount of tools that ranged units can take advantage of is such a stark contrast from the melee ones. Even something as simple as the Erica ring separates them to a significant degree, as it's effectively a free tack-on to any melee unit. Also not helped by many of them being strictly safer and better initiators with all of the skill accessibility they have, meaning they end up being the better choice of nuke in many cases. Ranged units could always do reflex shenanigans to compensate, but that still heavily favors melee units anyway. Many far saves have dropped distant counter in some parts of the game, so they don't get messed up by the reflect status, and it tends to be fine because they can wall out the damage anyway. As a result, all they really have to do is sit there and survive. With melee units, armors have to attack back, which makes reflect a lot more consistent. Also helped, again, by being bulkier initiators who can take hits more often. I think it might take more than making them hit harder. They may need an additional niche on top of that. That said, if they drop a new ranged nuke that has 1 billion true damage anyway, then it wouldn't matter at that point, right? Another idea they could potentially do is keep making melee nukes stronger, which sounds extremely backwards, but hear me out. Also, pretense this part is for summoner duels specifically. If they keep doubling down on melee nuke buffs, then sooner or later they'll need to drop skills that not only try to wrangle back these units, but have to make them incentivizing enough to be used. As it currently stands, physical save is going up in value in summoner duels specifically, because it covers most weapon types. Moreover, there aren't a lot of common threats that physical save can't cover, but again, that's mostly for summoner duels. In Aetherids, it's still the standard near save, far save, wombo combo, and I don't think that's going to change for a long while, if ever. It's more consistent and safer to have a near save and a far save. Physical save and magic save don't allow for the use of something like Shield Fighter, as Pavais and Aegis strictly target one type of range. It's an important distinction, especially right now, as many teams do incorporate the use of Shield Fighter and reflect to beat melee initiators. Also not helped by Lin Ring units who can potentially snipe something as a result of taking out a physical or magical save. So maybe they should keep buffing range 1 units for the time being, especially dragons, as we don't have any that could reasonably player phase. Have a lot of people become dependent on the idea of running near save in summoner duels, and then that way they could later drop a brand new 3-space near save skill. Thus players move over to that skill and the amount of barriers range 2 units have diminishes. It might sound like a massive jump, but I would also like to remind you that we do have Fallen Dedue who can omni-save within 4 spaces. Granted, he isn't the tankiest armor, but his performance ceiling is absurdly high as a result of his savior gimmick. I don't think a 3-space near save is the biggest deal in the world, but it would have to be only near save. I think if they end up dropping a 3-space far save skill, then it completely defeats the purpose of it all. Now, they could do that down the line if it gets to a point where range 2 units become the dominant nuking type, but for the time being, it would have to be near save only. They could even double doubled down on the idea of it by allowing range 2 units the opportunity to attack from several spaces away, like with the Lin ring, except with more consistency. The introduction of Emblem Corrin in her ring has nerfed a lot of units' abilities to hit and run without the use of legendary Sakura and Summer Happy, or even get in as easily at times because of the ice. Letting range 2 units swing from further away at a more consistent rate could be a nice alternative option to melee nukes who have to get in their face. Barring Brave Byleth, but he's kind of his own thing. I'm unsure if making it the same range as the Lin ring would be the right play because it would render the ring moot. However, it could be like Mythic Lin where you only get the ability from one unit, thus limiting the spread of it. Or they could just make it 4 spaces instead of 5, but I don't know if that's too little or not. It depends. You can tell me otherwise. But even if it's not with that specifically, I like the idea of them having different initiation methods since it can diversify the way nukes perform in general, especially with Corrin ring being a thing. And if none of these options are enough, then, you know what? Just give them some broken inheritable skills or more range or something. I don't know. I'm out of ideas here. I definitely think if they want to fix up range 2 units as a whole, then they definitely could. Like I said earlier, they did make staff units so amazing this year by dropping a new tool for them each month for, what, 6 to 7 months? Alongside so many other unit archetypes, it's definitely in their power to do that if they really wanted to. I like the idea of every unit typing in the game having the ability to contribute something useful because it means anyone's favorite character can be used, which I think is a nice end goal. Honestly, I'd imagine this will be an issue of the past within a year or so, and I'm not worried about them getting patched up. I just think as it currently stands, they could be in a much better place. Well, besides heaven, since they do currently reside there. And these are only the ideas I could think of. They may not even be the most amazing ideas either. I'm sure y'all have better ideas than I do when it comes to this entire thing. If you could think of another idea that could reasonably make them worthwhile units, then let me know. And if you can't think of anything that could help them out, then let me know. You could just say my ideas are stupid if you want. But yeah, that's all I really got here. I'll see you in, who knows how long when they make range 2 units really good again. I cannot wait for that one to age really, really poorly.
Be gone!